Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this webinar, The Need for Speed in Continuous Testing, How to Get End-to-End Coverage for Enterprise Systems. This webinar is being recorded and will wing, see what I did there, its way to you very, very shortly. My name is Ryan Thornton, and as product marketer at Virtuoso, it's incumbent upon me to lead you through the next 30 minutes. I will be amply aided and abetted by my partner in test, man whose sales engineering skill is only surpassed by his inability to take a cue on a webinar. The sales engineer without compare, kind of works. Mr. Bent feels the need.
For speed, there you go.
Yeah,
I did that on purpose. I typically do miss my cues, but yeah, today we're going to be on point, apart from that one, of course.
Brevity is our close and personal friend, so let's jump to the agenda at Mach 10. We will start with a brief introduction as to what continuous testing is. We're not going to kind of dwell too much or tell you how to suck eggs on that. Looking at the current challenges that you still face, some of them are overcome, but to what extent we'll be investigating. And then we'll look at how we actually get that speed. There will be a demo, which is the good juicy bit, showing you just how you can get that in sprint, minimal maintenance test automation, and a QA. There is a QA panel. I will be on hand throughout the next 30 minutes to answer any of your questions, and we'll get them out at the end. So please feel free to pop them in that little QA panel. And we start with our marketing of our product. It's Virtuoso, and we get ship done faster. It delivers the power of code with the ease of codeless and empowers anyone to create robust and reliable functional UI end-to-end and integration tests for their web applications. And it's pretty much completely codelessly. We do have a script, but it's plain English. It's steadfast and easy to use platform that gives you a shitstorm, the good kind, to release higher quality products faster, which moves us quickly along to what is continuous testing. So always be testing, always be ready for release. The definition that we've put together, it's the process where automated tests are automatically triggered during a software delivery pipeline. This results in immediate feedback being given as to the business risks associated with releasing the software. So are we good to go? That's the question we're looking to answer here. Is it a risk for me to release this this application, this update? It's an approach that is linked to continuous integration, continuous delivery, as opposed to releasing on a set timescale, just always releasing, where you're always ready to release and therefore always testing. So it's all about risk for me, and always being ready to release is by no means feat. Just because of the sheer amount of testing that needs to go on, and the fact that it tends to happen at the end of the sprint, simply because a lot of the UI and end-to-end tests require traditionally a app to be in place for you to create them and certainly for you to execute them. But what we therefore do is not look to get kind of a lot of complete coverage. We look at the risks to the business and associate risks with each of your test cases. The aim is not to get just simply blanket test coverage, but risk coverage. So I'm going to explain this in a really, really simple example, but I hope simple examples are the best for highlighting a point. So we imagine that, got to go with me on this a little bit because, it's hypothetical. So there's a release and there's 3 test cases that validate the following 3 assertions. Firstly, make a purchase, that the purchase is made on screen. Dispatch order, that the dispatch notification is sent to the warehouse. And finally, email invoice to the customer, that the customer receives an invoice by mail. And in this hypothetical situation, 2 of the tests pass and 1 fails, or 66% of the test cases have passed. This may or may not meet the threshold for release. Let's just say it does. But if we look a little bit further, we attach risk and things look a little bit different. So again, these are arbitrary and hypothetical, but you make a purchase, 60%, the order's dispatched, 30%, email invoice to the customer, 10%. Now, the customer service team might not be that happy if the invoices aren't getting sent to the customer. But if we're completing the purchase and we're dispatching the order, they're really the things that we want to see happening and seen as the risk involved. So here, if 1 test fails, you could have anywhere between 10 and 90% risk coverage, depending on that test. So that's kind of how we can focus our efforts, because end-to-end testing is traditionally difficult. It sits aloft that pyramid in the most time-consuming and difficult to do. So then we order the tests to make sure that we're doing the ones that are most important to us. So everything's sorted then. Well, not really. Because while it does mitigate to a certain extent the problems that are there, and as applications become more complex, test suites become bigger, although it's mitigated some of them, there is still underlying issues that need to be addressed. And that is that you simply can't author quick enough to ensure that you're always ready to release. In sprint test automation in a meaningful way, because obviously everything should be in sprint if you're continuous testing, but I'm talking about meaningful, is really an aspiration with a lot of the traditional methods, and certainly not a reality for a lot. And this is multiplied, particularly the more and more tests you get, by just the crippling maintenance overhead. Oftentimes people are still, even when adopting continuous testing, I've seen that they are slimming it down and associating risk, but still just debugging flaky tests, maybe with some redundancy in there. Redundancy should be overcome by the fact that you're adopting continuous testing, but hey, things get bigger and bigger. So we're here, I think, James, it's a nice little segue to kind of show you how you can get in sprint test automation, how you can get authoring speed that means that you're pretty much always ready to release, can plug into that CI/CD pipeline and make test maintenance a thing of the past. Or 99% a thing of the past, should I say?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see a nice picture of Ryan and I at our weekends. We always feel the need for speed. I don't know which one I am.
Thanks, Goose.
There you go. Thank you very much. Yeah, but look, I mean, let's show this in action. And look, I always enjoy listening to you, Ryan, and because you've got a lot of knowledge around this, and I think it does reflect what we're seeing in the market, right? That 2 things: you do need speed. And the second one is that inhibitors are, as we're going to show you, being able to author really quickly, ideally in sprint, but then also being able to deal with that sort of biggest bugbear, which is bigger than a bugbear, maintenance, that real issue. So let's get straight to that. So I'm going to nick the screen from you, Ryan. Here we go. And bring mine up. Awesome. So we're going to talk to you about Virtuoso. So some of you may have seen us before, some of you may be familiar, some of you may never have heard of us and are coming for the first time and don't know what this is all about, but we'll take it from the top. I mean, number one, we'll say a codeless test automation platform, where what we're saying is we're enabling anybody to write tests in natural language, which you could argue language itself is a type of code or program, but what we are saying is that you can write test steps for any browser-based application, predominantly in functional UI testing, but also I'm going to show you how you can bring in integrations, APIs, and then also visual regressions. But fundamentally, when we talk about authoring tests, we're talking about doing that in natural language. Literally, if I see that there is a continue button on screen, I can write a test step, which is click on continue, for example. So really for us, we're saying that number one, when we talk about, authoring, we've also got to talk about who can do that authoring. And the answer is anybody that really is involved in testing. So long as they can literally understand the flows of applications, they can start writing test steps with absolutely no setup required. Yes, there is an understanding of the syntax. It's pretty straightforward, clicking on buttons or writing in boxes, and I'll go through some more other capabilities we have. Otherwise, it's just as much as if I have the features or capabilities released during a sprint and they're ready for me to start testing, I can simply navigate to the URL and start writing the test steps. Equally, because we're using natural language, we can be leveraging building tests from designs, plans, requirements, whether it's coming in and using, let's say, Gherkin syntax requirements, whether it's looking at wireframes, designs, something drawn on a whiteboard. Essentially, as soon as I have that detailed down where I know what will be built, being able to come in and start authoring pre-development or as you're going through the sprint, but the features haven't yet been finished, being able to say I can set up the structure of my test from requirements and start authoring because I know there will be a book a demo button, then you can start writing that again at the plan or maybe as the development is ongoing. So being able to start sort of shifting left, being able to author your automation in a really accessible and easy means that could be, we have BAs doing this, manual testers, equally esthets and developers use the platform. You start to have anybody can participate to author as soon as the designs are ready, or if it's at the stage of the feature being released, then being able to write the test steps immediately. Now that's our general capabilities, but we're really here also to talk today about that sort of testing across whether it's different capabilities in one application or going more end-to-end testing, which could be across multiple applications, but also take into account integrations. We are finding that more and more with the architectures being microservice and integration driven, the need to test with integrations is becoming much greater. And we facilitate for that by way of the fact that you can not only test functional steps in your tests. So here we're going through, I think we'll be seeing this is an SAP S/4HANA. It's a browser-based application, of course. Whether that's a Salesforce application, which I think we have across here. So I could be doing any sort of business systems. It could be front end, sort of a portal, an e-commerce store, placing orders, for example. As long as it's a browser-based application. Here we're doing on public applications, but if it's on a private network, we have a bridge client to create a tunnel to still test on private networks. But this is all functional steps. We can combine those with integrations. So for instance, here I am passing a sales order from SAP S/4HANA into an integration, which then could be to test that integration layer at a certain point in a workflow, and then do things like assert on the responses that are returned, for example. So here I'm just checking part of the payload meets an expected value. Now what this means is if we just sort of drive up it, when Ryan sort of talked about, you could have typically, you might have different test cases which are testing different features. It could be the login steps. It could be the create sales order. Typically, we find people they might be doing a couple of those in conjunction in the same test. But what a lot of people tend to do is test these as features. And as Ryan mentioned, whether they're prioritizing these, assigning risk to them to be able to then understand when I'm running my test, what's my top priority to run these. I mean, that's great in a way. I mean, if you can get some sort of risk-based prioritization, then yeah, you may feel that you meet certain thresholds and, you test your feature, I can log in. Well, okay, you've tested that. But then what you're not really doing is combining that in a workflow to say, I'm going to log in, create a sales order. Then I'm going to take the sales order details, pass it via an integration. And now in the same journey, the same test, I'm going to open Salesforce in this case in a new tab. So here actually being able to test multiple tabs with 2 or more applications open in the same journey to now start focusing on that end-to-end workflow, whether it is from the user perspective, an end user, it could be multiple users. So I'm coming into my front-end store as an end customer. I'll go and place the order. That's in one tab. Then I'll jump across into, let's say, SAP to do order management, where I'm logging in now as an internal resource who's doing order management. You can have multiple personas where now the end-to-end test is the business workflow testing. And all of this is facilitated by writing in natural language. Now, to actually sort of give an idea of, obviously we're talking about the fact you can see that, yeah, it's natural language. That's nice and quick. Great. But let's actually look at how that works in reality. So let's say that the features have been released and I am a tester. It's in sprint. We're doing or continuous releases, and I need to ensure that I can author really, really quickly. Now, one thing we can do here, I've already got my steps written for logging in. So I can leverage those by generating a new journey. This could be my, let's say, end-to-end test 2. Really great title there. Probably want to do a more descriptive one. And then what we're doing is we're running what we call live authoring, which is where we have a live browser window. We're deploying a bot, which is enabling us to run the test live. And we'll just see that in a second when it comes up. I'm just going to refresh. So what this enables us to do is to say, as I'm authoring my test, I can actually see that executing in the browser window. And if we just run that through, you can see we've now got the live browser. It's executing the steps that I've already got written. But what this allows me to do is to say that as I get to a certain point, great, I've already written those steps and it gets me to logging in where now I can start managing my sales orders. And I've now got to create a test, in this case, to create a sales order. So how can I do that really quickly? I've got to ensure that I can keep up to get the test done in the shortest amount of time, because you're always under pressure, because testing is typically one of the last points before saying, yes, we can release. The pressure's on you to get that done really quickly. So with our live authoring, we can literally come in, and as you start writing your test steps, I might want to click on the create button. I can just say, click on create. I don't have to predefine that create. I don't need any sort of objects or define any of the element selectors for that. I can just say, click on create. And in doing that, Virtuoso goes and executes that test step, shows me on screen it's worked, and then shows that it's gone green. It's working. I then might want to say, click on, let's say, create sales order, for example. So again, don't have to define anything here. It's just based on what I can see on the screen. Of course, it helps if I can type. And therefore, we click that and it goes now and moves on to the next page. And I can start creating the sales order. Now I can see that the page is loading. And of course, here I've got a dev environment of SAP. It's a little bit slow. So I've just waited for that to come up. So I should just put in a wait. So wait for, let's say, I don't know, sales order type. That's something unique I can see on the screen. The great thing here is that when we do this, we convert these into dynamic waits. So for instance, here, instead of waiting, let's say a hard wait of 20 seconds, I could say wait 20 seconds or for sales order to load, whichever is the soonest. So from sort of making this that you can now, when we run our end-to-end tests on any environments, we can make it really efficient to run this when we execute through. Now, what I could do here is I want to click on this icon. Now, I could actually interact with the screen and right-click and say I wanted to click on that. Now, I could also go in and say, I want to come into the advanced mode, and I might want to say, is there a name to that icon? I want to write a test step against that. So what we can do is come in and actually hover over the icon here, and we can see that the name of this is show value help. So you can live inspect into the dev tools to be able to say, actually, I've got a name for that now. I don't have to just say, click on XPath or something. I can now say, click on, let's say, show value help. And that will go and interact with that particular element. As you can see there, moves on to the next step. If I now want to click on CCFU, I can interact with that. So I could come in and literally go click on this element, and it then writes the step for me, goes and clicks on it. And then I could just simply say, click on OK, for example. So hopefully I'm not going to go and write a full end-to-end test, because hopefully you're getting the gist of this. Bearing in mind, we can do things not just like clicking and writing and all those great things. We can also be coming in and we could say, if I want to store this value into a variable, so I could say this is my sales order type, then I can do that. I can go ahead and store values. So maybe when I create my sales order, I could store that into a variable. So you can see I've just done that. And then I could perform assertions against that. So I could say, could be assert that the sales order type maybe contains CCFU, for example. So this isn't just about writing functional steps. We can do, as you can see here, we could be storing data, asserting data on data, which is particularly important in an end-to-end test, because you might be testing against applications where you don't know on a given day what data is in those environments. So whether you are setting up, you could do test data to be able to create parameterized data sets that you could then seed and put into the environment. You could then populate rather than putting in explicit values. Equally, we could be making API calls. We could be literally driving in and say, I want to make an API call, and this could be to get user details and return that into a response so that now I can use those details to be able to drive my tests. I could literally make calls to get details that are in environments and have those stored and available and ready to use in parameters. So now, for instance, I could write, it could be response.data.data.email into a particular box. So not only making API calls to test the integrations, but also to leverage them to actually get the data to set up into your tests. So hopefully that's giving a flavor. I mean, you can imagine the speed of doing this. When we looked at our original test, I mean, literally, I sat down just this morning and just wrote a test through that enabled me to test against multiple applications at speed in natural language. You can do in sprint automation now. What we're actually doing here to let you know is that when we are to basically how this works is we're coming in, and this leads into the test maintenance side. We're actually inspecting at the DOM level. We're launching bots. We're launching a headless browser to then inspect at the DOM level and discover that element. So all the selectors, XPath, IDs, class names, and so on. And that's even if there are multiples of the same element. For instance, if you remember, we had this show value help, and I just don't have, let's go to the execution here to show that. Even if there are multiples of that same element, then you can still pick the right one, even though you are only using the label that's on screen or the label of it, for example. So how did it pick that one and not this one or this one, for example? You can say, look for the distribution channel and then click on the element relative to that so that I never have to drop into code to do this. You could use an XPath in our idea if you wanted to, a class name, but you don't have to. You can still write this and identify the correct element very, very well. So we are absolutely going through and capturing all of the selectors to be able to identify the element. And what that also feeds into is that, we find that a lot of people aren't doing end-to-end testing because of, number one, it does take time to write these traditionally. It doesn't in Virtuoso, you can do it very quickly. But another sort of issue is that when you start running longer and longer tests, and you have things like in Salesforce, you have dynamic IDs changing, or someone moves the button across, so the XPath changes, or it could be the label changes on screen because of localization, or you want to pick the sales order number, but that changes each time. So you want to pick that element in that place. Those things can cause tests to break, of course. It can literally mean you're spending your time fixing those things to try and keep your tests running. So it's actually easier sometimes to keep your tests short so that actually, you don't have to have such of a maintenance issue. Now in Virtuoso, you don't have to really worry about that, because what we are doing is saying every time we run the tests on each execution, by the way, you can run tests in parallel. Well, and I'll show you in a second, you can run tests from CI/CD tools as well as execution plans. Every step we are running, which is, you can see it's running in real time here based on the timings. We are looking at the previous working model of the element and comparing it to the current model. And if there is any change within the structure, be the label, the class, the XPath, the ID, we are using machine learning driven algorithms to basically go through and say, if we can determine with confidence that it's the same element, then we self-heal that as the test is running. And that works incredibly well. 97% of cases across all different types of changes. I mean, if you're talking dynamic IDs, it's going to be close to 99.99%. And these are things which we demonstrate to our customers on their applications so they can see for themselves. What this does is means that every time you see these sticking plasters, it is healing those test steps through changes that have occurred, whether it's in the structure or the labels. This reduces maintenance burden absolutely significantly, and our marketing team will go on and say, the automation makes you 100 times better. And, people say, well, yeah, I don't believe that. But if you simply think about the fact that for all the test steps you have, if I scroll down here, every single one of these plasters, if this is a dynamic change or an update that's required, the amount of time you spend debugging each and every one of those simply to keep the test running that you no longer need to do, that is where you get these benefits from. And then bear in mind, you've got things around, since we're looking at test reporting, we are capturing for each execution versions of the test. We're capturing screenshots for before and after interactions. It's in natural language so people can read this. But then if there are failures, this one's passed, so that's fantastic. But if we go back through and look for a failed test, we can easily see this test failed. We can drill in. We can see exactly where that was. It's at this step here. I can look at the screenshots and see, well, hang on a minute, I can't find the field. And I can drill into here the root cause analysis. So I could see a summary of the executions, page source to look at the DOM at the time the test was run, page network, and page console logs. So from a reporting perspective, if you can author end-to-end tests, you're getting good coverage, whether it's priority or risk, because now you're testing everything in a flow. And you now know that's how the user will use it, And if you can do that, whether it's, starting before the development's done or during, but definitely getting this ready so that in sprint you can be now running your tests and getting these insights. You've now got that speed and control and the reduction in the maintenance burden to start doing this rather than it being a pain point. And as I mentioned, absolutely, you can hook this into pipeline tools because from a particularly an enterprise perspective, you do need to have those integrations to fit into your pipelines. So you could run this and execute and say, as we're uploading our code, let's go and initiate, run an associated goal, a test plan, do that automatically. This can be parameterized. So you could tag or choose what you want to be able to run. But then also from a reporting perspective, we have integrations into popular tools like X-Ray and TestRail. So you can do test reporting as well. So in summary, this really is making it easy for anybody to be able to come in and author, whether it's in sprint or you're doing continuous development, to author your tests in natural language, focus on multiple applications and integrations in an end-to-end flow from a user or workflow perspective, get those run and report with real insights while knowing that your tests are maintained through the self-healing. These are the things that we are finding are adding massive value and why we're engaged more and more, both within enterprise, but also mid-market and frankly, all level of customers doing testing against browser-based applications. So hopefully that has been insightful. I will hand back to Ryan, who's probably been facilitating hopefully some questions in the background, which I think we can now come on to and answer.
Yeah, thank you, James. Perfect as always. We're so perfect, in fact, that you've brought us up to 29 minutes. So we will stay on and continue with this Q&A session, but I appreciate that people's times are tight, so thank you for coming. If you do need to drop, but if you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A. In the meantime, I'm just going to launch a poll, which is asking, would you like to be prioritized for a personalized demo? Yes or no? If you would like to be prioritized for a personalized demo, if your appetite has been whetted, then please do click on the yes. And if not, then click on the no. Questions around data driving tests. Let me have a little look. So I've got, if I reuse the same steps, once data is created and execute the same script, it will fail as the data is already present. How would you overcome that? And I think it is basically, can we do data-driven testing? Could we overcome that through that?
Yeah, so one thing we didn't just highlight there was that you can do a number of different things, whether it's using fixed data scenarios, which you can run through, but then API calls to get data, but then you can also generate random data, which you could then be actually using, let's say, an expression to join and say, I want to create company 1, 2, 3, and then put a random, let's say, identifier at the end. So you can be sure that you're actually generating unique data within your tests whether that's parameterized or whether it's random data driven, to be able to always make sure that you're not just going through and creating those fixed data sets. So yeah, and there's a number of different methods to be able to do so, but those are some of the fundamental capabilities to drive being able to ensure that you can test with data.
Okie doke. Okay, good one. Because I need to promote this. Do you have a plan to provide the ability to comment out test steps so you can debug quickly?
Yeah, we definitely do. So you can already do that. So you can absolutely put comments just with a couple of, what are they called, backslashes, and then you can comment out in your steps. When you can put different levels on there. It could be a to-do or a note, for example. So yeah, you can definitely do that, which is, even if you want to leave some sort of notes in there as to what was being tested and why, so that anybody can understand that. So yes, you can definitely already do that.
And then a little bit deeper into that, I would like to comment some test steps to get to areas quickly, but then uncomment them when ready to include later. But I mean, we're able to edit and kind of do what you want with it.
Absolutely. And then in addition to that, you can also put things in like tags. So if you want to be able to put tags on to then drill through, filter, and then see maybe that these are for my smoke test, or these are to be, for next release, for example, then yeah, the ability to look through and edit those and, get to what you need to work on, or share that with other people, including and put comments on, for instance, at Ryan, I want you to go and look at this test, please. Can you please do some work for him?
On this topic, another thing I'd kind of like to add is when we were looking at the advanced mode on live authoring, and you were able to get the dev tools, that means that you can share that URL with anybody in the dev team. And I mean, I like to say that it's the death of a meme, because you can always reproduce, because not only do you then share the bug, you also share the environment which that bug was found in, and you have the ability to use your dev tools within that very same environment. So you have all of those three things in a URL. So they'll always be reproducing those bugs.
You're absolutely right.
And then just one quick last one, nice and easy, cross-browser.
Yep. So we hook into grids in the background where we have our own plans, but you could bring your own as well. And that enables you to run on real devices across different OS and browsers, whether it's Windows, Edge, sort of Mac Safari, or iPhone Safari, Android Chrome. Then yeah, you can run the same tests on different operating systems and devices to be able to test on those to validate.
Okay, this is an interesting one. I genuinely don't know the answer. Is there a way to exclude test steps? I've put James on the spot here. That's terrifying news for a sales engineer. I don't know the answer, but we'll go ahead. Is there a way to exclude test steps from an execution without removing them? This will be helpful for debugging and development. Ultimately, I want to keep them all, but yeah.
Yeah, so what we have more is we don't have sort of switch on off per se, but if you have, say, a step that, I don't know, maybe it doesn't always appear, for example, but you know that in some points it's going to appear at that point, then you can actually set behaviors on those to say that if, for instance, in a particular run, then you want to say, I want this test to continue, even if that step isn't going to be applicable. You could set that step to say continue and just, raise a flag to say it didn't appear. So yeah. But what you can do as well as you may have seen sharing the checkpoints. Some things we have people doing are building a full end-to-end test, but they might say, actually, there's a section I don't want to run. You can now actually easily just populate in your different parts of the test and maybe omit to now actually create a unique test, which may be to run that scenario. So rather than trying to do it all in one per se, you can still share them and then run them sort of as separate packs if you're going to be doing it again and again. Different ways to achieve it, but yes, it can be done.
And that's us. I think it's an assumption, but I think possibly some of these questions are coming from current Virtuoso users. I would absolutely reach out to customer success through Le Chat bot or Le Chat bot that we have in app. The bot's only there for a few seconds. You get through to the human beings in our wonderful customer success, and I'm absolutely sure they'll be able to help run through these things if that is the situation. If that isn't the situation, then book a demo and Mr. Bent himself will be able to show you those things, which was an absolute wonderful marketing segue to try and get some more lead flow, which leaves me nothing else to do but say thank you, Mr. James Bent.
Thank you, Mr.
And thank you, everybody, for coming. Always be releasing, always be testing. Take care. Ciao, ciao for now.